So I'm actually going to, I'm going to give my little spiel about the trip now. I'm cueing Josh because he is our technical guru and is going to help me be able to present to you some images. So this is by way of a Devar Torah, right, which means a word of Torah. And it's often based on where we are in the cycle of Torah readings or where we are in the cycle of holy days. And now I am basing tonight's Devar Torah on having had the great privilege to have been in Israel just a couple of weeks ago, and I've been struggling with how to share about this experience that was really beyond words. And so I've decided to base my sharing in pictures. Now, I can tell that that's not going to be a great view for some of you. Feel free to shift around. And I'm sorry we don't have a full feature film type screen for you. Yeah, let's maybe move it over a little. I don't know. Let's see. If I move back a little. Okay, great. So maybe people will shift around. And those on Zoom, we've got you covered. Those on the live stream. All right. So I was there as part of a group that was convened by the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, which is, I guess I like to describe it as a think tank, but a think tank that does a lot of incredible action in Israel and for the Jewish people outside of Israel, and does a lot of thinking and acting around the relationship between the Jews of Israel and the Jews of the diaspora. And some of my most beloved teachers are faculty members there or fellows there, and I've had the privilege of studying there the last 2 summers for their 10-day Rabbinic Torah seminar, where rabbis from all over, usually 150 or so or even more, come together to delve into Torah together. So this group was convened under those auspices, under the Shalom Hartman Institute of America. There were about 35 rabbis connected to that institution who took this opportunity to travel together as a cohort and to be in Israel for really just about 4 days. If you had ever told me before this war that I would travel to Israel for 4.5, really 3.5 days, I would have said that is insane and I would never do such a thing. But trying times call for important exceptions, and it honestly felt like I was there for at least a month. That is how packed with opportunities to help, to serve, to learn, to listen, to bear witness this trip was. So, all right, we're working on some tech.
Yes.
All right, great. Oh, it was locking. Okay, thank you. So a little bit more by way of introduction. You may not know that there are now, blessedly, a number of non-Orthodox rabbis in Israel. You may know or have heard in the news or have experienced this yourself that the Orthodox Rabbanut, the Orthodox rabbinic establishment, has really governed Jewish life in Israel. Not Jewish life as it is lived on the ground, but it is, for instance, if you want to get Jewishly married in Israel, you would have to have an Orthodox rabbi marry you. Things have shifted over the years in different ways, and thank goodness now non-Orthodox conversions are recognized in Israel. If somebody wants to make Aliyah, to immigrate to Israel and have converted outside of Orthodoxy, that's now recognized. But the point is, for the purposes of this talk, there is such a thing as liberal, non-Orthodox, or pluralistic Judaism in Israel. And there are, and I don't have the number for how many rabbis there are, but one of the blessings of the trip that I took was that we were really with a number of these rabbis who have been, like everybody in Israel, and this is what I'm going to talk about, these rabbis have been absolutely full-time engaged in helping, providing all kinds of spiritual support around trauma, being at every Shiva house. There are too many to name, right, where people are mourning a loved one from October 7th itself or from the war subsequently. Providing in what's known as Hostages Square, which I'm going to show you some pictures of, which has developed as a gathering place for supporting families of hostages. The members of this group of Israeli rabbis, known as Rabbanut Israelit, have come together and helped and led services and song sessions, of which I got to be a part when I was there. So those are the people that I was with, many other rabbis of congregations, also some leaders of Jewish day schools throughout North America. So you may be wondering, what is this? This is my first slide, because to tell this story, I want to begin at the beginning. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah, it's the airport. The reason I put this slide here is I've never seen it look like this. It's empty. Those tables are usually full. This is the view that you see when you walk. You've come from your gate and you're proceeding through the airport, and I had never seen it hauntingly empty like that. Okay. There are always signs for where there are shelters in Israel, especially in places in the south, closer to Gaza, which it used to be that their main issue was rocket attacks. And now we know that that was not the only threat. But still today, as you know, many thousands of rockets are being launched against Israel, and sometimes even at the airport. So throughout the airport, there are these signs. In Hebrew, it says Merchav Mugan, which means defended area, another name for a shelter. So there were many more signs for shelters than I had ever seen. Really, every building in Israel has one, which tells you something in and of itself, but I've never seen so many signs. Most striking, and I thank God I was prepared for this part, because I had had several colleagues go on other similar trips already as soon as the third week in October. Can you tell what these are from there? Yeah, these are posters, each one representing one of the hostages that were at that time. So this was November 27th when I arrived. And there's a very long corridor, as you can see. The entire corridor, from beginning to end, on both sides, was lined with these beautiful, precious faces and names. It felt very sacred. It felt like I had to walk slowly and really honor and look at the face of each one. I took a little video, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to play that. Now, the reason I'm showing a picture of me looking totally jet-lagged and exhausted at the airport with a sign with my name on it is that these are two very special people. The three of us formed a little part of a really important chain that got gifts that were made by students at the Rashi school that's here in Dedham, Jewish day school, K through 8. Kids there made little kits of games and toys and activities for kids from Kfar Aza, one of the most badly hit kibbutzim, with many who were murdered and taken hostage. And the survivors of that kibbutz, along with 200,000 others, are refugees in their own country. And kids at the Rashi school wanted to do something for them. So I answered a post on Facebook that said, is anyone going to Israel anytime soon and before Hanukkah, and could you bring a suitcase of gifts? I said yes, because it's just not a big deal. The amount of gratitude, and I'm talking about this because it's a theme throughout this trip, the gratitude from the Israeli teacher at Rashi who had put me in touch with her sister, who's this woman, Smadar, and her husband, who were going to meet me at the airport to pick it up and get it to the kids. To me, it was no big deal. I brought an extra suitcase. As a matter of fact, the angel at the El Al check-in counter didn't even charge me for the extra baggage. It takes a lot of people to make a mitzvah, right? We were like a mitzvah team. And it was just not a big deal. And I was embarrassed by the outpouring of gratitude from these two people. They wanted to invite me to their house. Everyone was so moved by these little things that, and colleagues of mine on other trips had the same experience. Like, I brought something that Israelis needed and it was no big deal, but everyone couldn't stop thanking me. So that's the people who picked up the suitcase. I heard that it got safe and sound to the children of Kfar Aza, and I hope that they enjoyed it over Hanukkah. Everywhere in Israel now, you see signs such as this one. And by the way, I know that for at least one Anson religious school student in the room, some of this is redundant. Nat, you're going to know this by heart. But you already know what this sign means because I talked about it to the Hebrew school kids. I Zoomed with them when I was in Israel. The adults in the room might not know that. I stayed up late so that at 4 o'clock Boston time, I could talk to Nat and his schoolmates to tell them about my trip in real time. This sign says, Anachnu ninatzeach. It means we're going to be okay. We'll be victorious. It's the anachnu part that I want to focus on. We. Everywhere you see we. And we are together. This is my cousin John, my second cousin on my dad's side, his wife Shira, and 2 of their 5 children under 6 years old who live in a town called Binyamina, which is north of Tel Aviv. And they were telling me they're so lucky, they feel that they live in kind of a bubble right in between. Geographically, they happen to be right in a spot where they really haven't had to go to their shelter much. They haven't had rocket attacks close enough to them, and so it was a joy to visit them. This is in a town called Zichron that I visited in the summer and made a stop at on this very short trip to see a dear friend. Everywhere in the store windows, you see signs like that, bring them home now, referring, of course, to the hostages. This really moved me because this is a beautiful cobblestone street in this town of Zichron Yaakov, or Zichron for short. It's a beautiful street full of cafes and restaurants. What struck me was it was so relatively empty. Many shop owners and people who work in restaurants are either serving or helping out in some other way during this war. But as in many cities and towns, you see chairs set up along the street with posters of the hostages. So everybody is waiting and praying for the hostages, and very much physically they are evoked on pretty much any street in any town. Here's another example of the communal, the together. This says biyachad natseach, together we will be victorious. This sign from the highway says, wow, I didn't make it so I could read that very well, but it says that we are a community together, and that we are strong together. Okay, does anyone recognize this? Masada. You may, if you've been a tourist in Israel, you may have hiked or taken a cable car to the top of that mountain. It's a very famous historical site from the Roman period. You wouldn't believe what it is now. This building, this national parks building where you would enter and get your information booklets and whatever as you're going to be a tourist at Masada, has been turned into a school. Not just one school, but 5 different schools that were set up almost overnight by regular, ordinary citizens. This is part of a vast civilian infrastructure that has been created not by the government. No one waited for the government, which is a terrible government, to do anything. People figured out how to get schools up and running for the hundreds of thousands of displaced children, and this is one of them. Here's just a little clip of a video, if the sound works, and if not, it's okay.
We received one part of the cafeteria
in
which we brought in tables. They gave us.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you about that. This is an educator, one of the volunteers. She is a teacher in her regular life, but during the war, she has come down to the Dead Sea region where Masada is situated to guide and to teach and to create these impromptu classrooms. This is a classroom. So I don't know how well you can see, but you're basically looking out at the Judean desert and the Dead Sea. And let's just say this is not a typical classroom in a typical school. But the kids that I met, who happened to be the middle schoolers, there was a high school down in the basement, there was a nursery school out in a tent. The tent had blown down. They were in the process, in a windstorm, they were in the process of rebuilding it. But I just wanted you to get a sense for these regular kids going to school, having painted rocks to decorate their area. One of these I wrote about last week in my message. It says, Nashuv v'nivneh, we will return and we will build. We will rebuild. One says, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. It was very moving. This one says, Am Yisrael Chai. The kids that were in this particular school are kids from a kibbutz called Sad, which is a religious kibbutz, kind of modern Orthodox. So, and I was reminded of that by seeing this abbreviation that religious kids would put at the top of anything they write. But I want to tell you a little bit more about the kids that I spoke with, who are regular kids enjoying Bamba and Doritos, classic Israeli snacks. These are 8th graders. These are 8th grade girls. They're used to going to school separate from girls and boys separately on a religious kibbutz. And look how typical 12-year-olds they look. This girl, Ori, is holding up her necklace. I'm wearing the same one. It says, bring them home now. Halev, it says in Hebrew, Halev shalanu shavui be'aza. My heart is captive in Gaza. And these are ubiquitous, these necklaces. So you can see they look like regular kids doing the silly faces that kids do in selfies, and the stories that they told me were unbelievable. And this is redundant if you read my Shabbat message last week. I did talk a lot about these girls, Shiri and Shachar and Ori. The stories of what they have witnessed were devastating. They were the lucky ones. Their kibbutz was, because of its geography and the timing of WhatsApp messages that were going from kibbutz to kibbutz, their kibbutz was saved from mass murder. But they did have several kibbutz members who they knew, either directly or indirectly, go and help their neighbors at Kfar Aza, which was a neighbor kibbutz that was very, very badly attacked. And they had stories that were filled with details. There were stories that had happy endings of a newborn baby who was saved because she was put in a windowsill. There were stories of the shop owner from the kibbutz that they had known their whole lives who was killed. And the two girls, the one with the duck face in the front and the one with her tongue sticking out in the back, the one in the back, Shiri, had just celebrated her bat mitzvah. And she told me in great detail about how they didn't think it was going to happen. It was the week or two after the attacks. They're staying in a hotel, which sounds nice, and it's not at all, right? They're stuck in a hotel in one room. They don't have a way to cook. They don't have any of their stuff with them. And she was telling me how everyone rallied to make a celebration for her. And then the one in the front making the silly face said proudly, and I'm going to have my bat mitzvah in another couple of weeks. But the things they told me were not things that you would want any 12-year-old to have seen or known about. And they were doing an amazing job of also living their lives. A picture I forgot to include, but it's in last week's newsletter and blog, is that one of them made little clay figures of her furniture in her home in the kibbutz. A bed, her stuffed animal that's on the bed, her refrigerator that she said proudly was full of delicious food. So there are lots of ways that these kids are clearly experiencing trauma and processing trauma. And it was incredible to see all of the adults around them who have just come to hold them and be with them and help them feel like there's some kind of normalcy. This is my friend and colleague, Rabbi Brent Spodek, who's playing hacky sack with a group of kids. This is in a kibbutz. We then traveled to, a hotel where a particular group of survivors is being housed right now. Those survivors are from a kibbutz called Cholit. Cholit was very badly devastated. Cholit is a very small kibbutz, and 15 of their members were murdered, and many were taken hostage. This is in the restaurant of the kibbutz where we had lunch. I took a picture of this sign that says Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives, and Rak Ahava Tenatzeach, only love will be victorious. So here's a big, big, unique, strong tree. So striking at this hotel that's right in the area of Ein Gedi Nature Preserve, if you've ever been there. That's where these survivors are being housed. This is a view of the Dead Sea. And I take it to contrast the view with the women that you see here and what they have been through. The young woman, four of these women, the one in the middle was our educator who was also a volunteer, just helping do some translation. The 4 women on either side of her are all survivors from Kibbutz Cholit. All of them have lost close family members and friends. And each of them had the remarkable strength to tell us what they had experienced that day from beginning to end in great detail. What was astonishing, apart from the facts of their stories, which are incomprehensible, is that they not only had the strength to talk to us, they really wanted us to hear them. And I, years ago, studied a lot about the Holocaust and the post-Holocaust years, and I remember learning that Holocaust survivors didn't want to talk for a while. It really wasn't until the 60s, as I understand it, that you really started to see testimonials and documentaries being made of survivors. These women, among the many, many thousands of survivors of these massacres, want their stories to be heard and known. And they, like the people throughout our trip, could not stop thanking us for coming and listening to them. It was heartbreaking that they felt as grateful as they did, because they know that people are already denying the horrors that they just went through. They know that there are people in this world who don't believe them, who don't honor their losses, who believe that they and their friends and family were legitimate targets because they were living in Israel. So it was both devastating and an incredible honor to hear their stories and to be able to hold them and to physically be able to hug each one of them as we left. And I hadn't thought about what I would say to them in advance, but what I ended up saying was, may you have a refuat hanefesh, may you have healing of spirit, as we say in the Mishaberach prayer. And they hugged me back and were so thankful. I want to tell you something special about the very young woman that's on the left. Her name is Shiri. She's 21 years old. Her father is a well-known Israeli professor named Ilan Troen, who spent some years as a professor at Brandeis. The story of their family, because of their years in Boston, made the Boston Globe. Some of you may even have seen it. And the reason I know it was in the Globe is because I saw it and immediately recognized the name, because Professor Troen had been my professor the first time that I went to Israel in 1995, where he taught political science at Ben Gurion University of the Negev in Beersheba, which is where I went as an overseas student for a semester. I saw the name and I gasped. I had known him, not well, but he was a beloved professor. And then he had come to Boston and now for many years has been living back in Israel. His daughter and son-in-law were murdered. They were murdered trying to protect their son, their teenage son, who was shot in the abdomen and survived, thank God. This woman, Shiri, is his sister. So she lost both of her parents that day. Her brother was gravely injured and has made a miraculous recovery. And her grandfather I knew years ago. He was my professor. And I learned when in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv buying a sweatshirt from the group that was raising money, I bought the sweatshirt from a woman who said, "Oh, Brookline, I lived there. My kids went to the devotion school. They had a teacher named Mrs. Troen." That's the mother. The grandmother, married to my professor. I'm trying to give you a sense of the intricate web of connection that you can't go anywhere in Israel without discovering, and especially not now. So I had the incredible zchut, the merit, the privilege to go up to Shiri, having heard all four of these women, and to give her my condolences directly and to tell her that I had known her grandfather. And thank God her grandfather and grandmother are still living and well, and but it's unimaginable. It is simply incomprehensible, the loss that Shiri and these women have gone through. The woman with the short white hair lost her father and his Thai caregiver. So these are the survivors of Kibbutz Cholit, and one of the greatest blessings of my life was to meet them and be able to bear witness to their stories. And it felt like hearing Holocaust testimony, but it had just happened 6 weeks before, 5 weeks, 6 weeks before. And they were right in front of us. This just to give you a sense of the group. So this is all of us, the rabbis and educators, and this very paradoxical, right, dissonant, beautiful, beautiful view of the Ein Gedi area. We sang with them. We sang a version of Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? It was really beautiful. But I don't think I can show you video with sound. Or is it playing, Josh, on your end? It's okay if it won't. We don't have a lot of time. You can hear it, but we can't. What if I turn up the volume? That gives you a sense. Okay, this is a very different picture. So this is another thing I really want to highlight. As part of this vast civilian infrastructure that I spoke of, there are places that in English we would translate as something like civilian command centers. They use an acronym that's from the military called the Chamal, the Cheder Milchama, war room. But this is not in Gaza or where the war is being fought. This is a storage area in a Chamal, so in a civilian command center, where supplies are donated and distributed for every possible need that you could comprehend. This is it's in a building, a 5-story theater, art, music school in Jerusalem. These duffel bags were brought from other rabbis on my trip. I brought the suitcase of gifts, and others brought supplies. We were given a list of what was needed. These are just the load of duffel bags from our bus of people, supplies from the US. This command center was filled with volunteers, not only Israelis, but I met a guy from Seattle who had just come by himself for a month to do whatever he could, and he was given a role in helping organize the supplies that are being donated. These are supplies for what they call in Hebrew the mefunim, the refugees, who are displaced and living all over the country and as guests in people's homes or in hotels. But there are also supplies for the military. The military usually calls for any needed military operation, might call X number of people and 80% of them show up. In this case, they had something like 120 or 140% came to try to help this war effort and came from abroad. You know, thousands of Israelis are traveling abroad all the time, especially after their army service is complete, and everyone went home. So they're lacking some basic supplies that we brought. Young guy, about 29 years old, set up that command center just about overnight, and it's filled. I couldn't even count the number of volunteers and the number of shelves with everything from hot chocolate packets to towels to headlamps to sleeping bags. Oh, there he is. He was amazing.
Kavod in Hebrew, honor, dignity, and respect. In one word, kavod is a very big thing because we know that it could have been us. We could have been evacuated.
What he's saying is they're taking only clothing that is in very good condition. We want to give kavod, dignity, respect to those who are in need of these items. And they developed a store called Otef. This is a store where everything is free. It's donations, right? It's what ordinary people have brought from abroad or from their homes in Israel. Toys, books, diapers, anything you can think of. Here's what I want to tell you, though. It says Otef. Otef has two meanings. Otef, Aza, is how you say in Hebrew the Gaza envelope, the region around Gaza where all those kibbutzim were attacked. But I didn't know this until this trip. Otef has another meaning. It means embrace. So they took the name of the place where these displaced people are from, Otef Aza, and now they simply call this Otef, the embrace, this incredible center of care and love and support. And the volunteers I talked to staffing that store are just incredible. This gives you a sense of all, it's just huge. And kids who are going stir crazy can come there and play. They have play areas. But again, this happened overnight. This was like I think it was the next day that they had gotten space in this building and set up these shelves. That says towels. That says, there's one shelf that said hot chocolate and coffee, and I thought, what more do you need? Look, that's our group hearing. You can see we're in a theater right now. So every available space is being used to help. Masada is being used as a school. A theater school is being used as a donation command center. These were various signs keeping track of what they have, what they need. Yeah, cafe, shoko, coffee, and chocolate on those shelves, baby formula. It just went on and on. Back to the ways that hostages are honored and remembered and thought of and prayed for on every street corner. Just walking back from the Hartman Institute one night, I see this stroller in the middle of the road with this most heartbreaking picture of one of the little toddlers who was kidnapped, 2 years old. When the hostages were released, some of them during my time there was when that happened. And you would see on every poster if they've been returned home, Baruch Hashem, thank God, they're home. Mechakim lachem babayit, we're waiting for you at home, says this large poster in front of a school that was on my way between my hotel and the Hartman Institute. Machzirim otam habaita achshav. That's been the motto of the Bring Them Home Now movement. It just means return them home now. You see these signs everywhere. Ordinary life is happening. I took some videos of just Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem on a regular school day morning. I saw people just walking to school and work. You see. Sometimes when we see the news, we don't understand that this is also happening in Israel. These people are just going to work and school, which has only been true after the first 2 weeks of the war. 2 different taxi drivers told me, people were very afraid to go out for the first 2 weeks, terrified. No one left. There was no school. Starting about the 3rd week, there started in areas like this where people can stay, where in the whole south of Israel, in many parts that are within reach of the many rockets or which have been decimated by attacks, people aren't living their normal lives because they're not at home. But in places like Jerusalem, they are. There's another stroller, another poster. And this was a little bit of a different change of scene. We got to pick olives. There's, as part of the civilian infrastructure of support and care, there is a vast agricultural system in Israel. And it really is very fragile, right? Because it's a place where, it's why our prayers have us pray for rain, because in that climate, rain isn't a given at the right time, and everything's very precarious. This is an olive farmer who needed our help. There are WhatsApp groups that say, this guy needs this help on this day doing this, and it's all agriculture. So we got signed up to help pick olives. He was amazing. Best accent I've ever heard in English.
Keeping it green as possible.
So he was, right, I won't go into the video because we don't have time, but it was a wonderful opportunity to try to help in a small way. Israelis make sure they have their coffee no matter what, so there's a little propane burner and a kettle in the middle of the olive fields. That's what olives look like when they're first picked. If you didn't know, I didn't. And again, they were so grateful. And it just, it felt like a little thing. These are the containers for his olive oil. And then he made us all have a tasting of olive oil. And there's a certain way you're supposed to taste it. It's very specific. Yachad ninatzeach. Together we will be victorious. Again, the signs. I want to show you an example of joy, of Jewish joy that is still going on. This is in Modi'in. These are sufganiot. These are Hanukkah donuts, and they were out in full array, every possible flavor. We need to step up our game here in the U.S. because these were next level sufganiot in Modi'in. But again, a storefront, a poster of someone who's been kidnapped. And sufganiot because we're going to still celebrate Hanukkah. All right. The place that I took the most pictures and the most video is the place we're getting to as I'm running out of time, but I'm going to tell you just a little bit about it. And this is Kikar Chatufim, which means the square of the hostages. You may have heard the story that I don't remember which one, but a family member of a hostage early on, after October 7th, kind of planted himself on a street corner in Tel Aviv as a way of protest, of prayer, of hoping others would gather with him, which they immediately did. Kind of a silent protest, and just what else could he feel like he could do with his family member being held in Gaza? Since that time, speaking of things being built overnight, an entire area in front of the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, an entire plaza filled with posters, art, music, tents for each individual kibbutz who lost people. This says, Toda Chayalim, thank you soldiers. This is just on the way to Hostages Square, and here we are in the square. There's a timeline, which now, unfortunately, we're up to 69 days. This was 53 days of how many days, hours, minutes the hostages had been held. It was an incredible time to be there because there was the ceasefire and there were hostages being released each night as the entire country held its breath because they were hours late and they weren't who they were supposed to be, and they split up families and did a lot of psychological traumatizing of already traumatized families. But in the end, thank God, 105 were released. This is sort of a performance art of a kind, if you could call it that, of somebody with their hands bound, sitting there on the plaza, surrounded by these posters that are all over the ground. The posters take everything from traditional Hanukkah songs to pieces of Jewish liturgy and kind of revise them for what is needed. You may have seen this in my message last week. This says, Bo choshech legaresh, come, banish the darkness. Kol echad hu or katan, everyone is a little light. Vechulanu or eitan, and together we're a strong light. Surah choshech, hala shchor, go darkness away. Surah mipnei haor, turn away toward the light. That's a Hanukkah song, but instead of it saying, we came to banish the darkness, it's saying, come, 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 please come, save us. Banish the darkness. So on and on, heartbreaking, devastating, baby dolls with hands tied. Kichi me'il yihye lach kar, it's going to be cold, take a coat. Ima, ani echakeh, betachana, Mom, I'm waiting at the station. So there is an Ethiopian Israeli who's been held for 9 years that you may not have heard about, but his family member is there. It says 3,370 something days. That this man, it says Gam li mechakim babayit. I'm also waiting. They're also waiting for me to come home. So, ani, ima, there's signs that say ima, abba, mother, father for the hostages. You can see there a sign for a shelter outside of the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. This installation goes on and on. This is one of the great leaders in the pluralistic liberal rabbis movement in Israel. Her name is Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum. She is absolutely extraordinary. She's the rabbi of a congregation called Sion in Jerusalem. And I won't play the video because of time, but I will say that she was kind of telling us about Kikar Chatufim there. Ani shayach la'am, I belong to the people. That's another sign. Ein nitzachon bli chatufim, there's no victory without the hostages. Shame on the Red Cross. These are all signs seen in Hostages Square. This is the tent for Kibbutz Be'eri. And you've heard of Be'eri. Be'eri was very badly attacked and lost a lot of people. This was almost too much to bear. This was a circle meant to look like a nursery school classroom.
So I'm here in a place called Hostages Square.
So you can see there are stuffed animals set up on the chairs, right? Again, it's a long video. Avinu Malkeinu, you know those words, Chonenu va'anenu. Our Father, our King, have mercy on us and answer us. That's from the High Holidays. There's a poster that takes those words and reinterprets them from now. A lot of these signs. This says, I'm a Lebanese Christian. Israel gave me equal rights and freedom while Hamas took Agams. That's the family members being held hostage. Bring them home. Nachal Oz, another kibbutz, badly hurt. This is their tent where the families gather. I'm an Arab Bedouin Muslim. Israel gave me equal rights and freedom while Hamas took Agams. Bring them home. You've all probably seen by now images of the Shabbat table, 240 seats at it, including high chairs, with a place for each hostage. This is painted rocks that say that we want to strengthen everybody, Be'eri, the name of the kibbutz. In this video, these people who none of whom know each other have spontaneously gathered. They're singing the prayer for the captives that we just recited. Oh, no, they're singing Vehisha Amda. In another video, they're singing the prayer for the captives. So you get the idea, but the most, for me, incredible moment of this moment beyond comprehension at this place was getting to lead, along with the Israeli rabbis, some of this service. That's me in the black sweatshirt. We're singing a song called Lu Yehi, If Only It Would Be. There are hundreds of people gathered, families of hostages, friends, people who've come from all over Israel and abroad. So that was Hostages Square. This was from the TV when the hostages were being returned at night. It was incredible to watch in real time from Israel. I spent some time at Hadassah Ein Karem Hospital, meeting a couple of soldiers who'd been wounded and were again embarrassingly thankful to us. This man had nearly lost his whole left side and was making a miraculous recovery. His name was Yosef. He told us, we're all one people, one family. Thank you so much for visiting us. We brought them sufganiyot. In every hospital in Israel, Arabs and Jews work side by side. It's not even a thought. It's not even, everyone is just working together to take care of people, and that's something that a lot of people don't know if they haven't spent time there. The hospital itself has pictures of hostages everywhere, diversity, flags, posters. This is all within the hospital. Orthodox women alongside Arab women, Yosef telling us his story, and some soldiers who received cards from our religious school students. And again, thanked us. Hirsch Goldberg Polin is the young man who lost half his arm, was kidnapped from the music festival and not seen or heard from since. His parents are incredible. His mother, Rachel, has spoken at the UN and with the Pope, and we got to sit in a room with her, and I'm going to skip all these. These are teenagers helping at a farmer's market because the farmers can't be there. Everyone's doing something. That's my friend whose son is serving in Gaza, my friend Jenny. That's my friend Mickey. And I just want to skip to Rachel and John Goldberg Polin. Some of the most extraordinary people I've ever met who are doing everything in their power, not only to bring their son home from Gaza, but to fight for all and to call for peace. She has spoken just beautifully. You can Google her after Shabbat, Rachel Goldberg Polin. And on the last night, as if it hadn't been intense enough, just as we were about to leave for the airport, we were invited to participate in a ceremony to honor the victims of sexual violence, of which there are many, many, many of all genders from that day and from captivity. And it was a day of remembering international victims of sexual violence, and it was incredibly profound. And that's my friend Jill Jacobs, head of Truah, the Rabbinic Campaign for Human Rights. She's in the middle. And my friend Sari, a rabbi in LA, and back to the airport, and it's empty. It was, and Elal is saying, Elal is here for you in routine and emergency times. You see that everywhere on the airline, and I Stand With Israel printed on the tickets. And look, there's fewer hostage posters on the way back. There are still way too many. But you could see the gaps where those hostages who had been released. I took this because in the airport bookstore there are dozens of books of one of my favorite rabbis, Jonathan Sacks. An airport bookstore. That's what's amazing about Israel, right? One of the things that one of your favorite rabbis would be featured in an airport bookstore. So that barely scratches the surface of what I experienced there, and I've talked for way too long, and I appreciate your patience. I want to just say that unity, this country of Israel was the most divided country you could imagine on October 6th. I was part of the protests of hundreds of thousands of people against the government. Let me be clear, people are still very much against the government. But there is a unity that is impossible to describe. There is a complete focus on taking care of each other. It should go without saying that the consequences of this war that no one wanted, except Hamas, are horrifying, not just for Israelis, but of course for the innocent civilians in Gaza. And right now, Israelis are focused on this fight for the survival of where they and millions of their fellow citizens live. So I'm not going to talk about that complexity right now, just so that you know they feel alone on winning this war that feels unwinnable, but of not having people who are sworn to their destruction at the border and waiting to come and do this again and again, which is what they have said, and we know they must be protected. So that's what I was saying, and they feel very alone. They feel very alone and very surprised that we're thinking of them, that we would do such a thing as come to help in any way, and they need our support. It's half of our people. If you're a Jew, you have family in Israel. Half of us live in Israel. And we're not big enough to discount them. We're 0.2% of the world population. So thank you for honoring and bearing witness in this way to the little, I feel like it's very little that I could offer right now, even though I spoke for so long, because it feels like that was barely a fraction of what I experienced, but at least you were able to get some of the themes. Unity and incredible gratitude, and incredible incredible resilience and resistance, and may we know better days. Everyone says to each other when you're getting out of a cab or just saying goodbye to someone, everyone says, Besorot tovot. It means there should be good news. I never heard that before in Israel being said all around, everywhere. Maybe among more religious communities, but Besorot tovot, we should have better news. So